safety. With anything that we do in here, that's really the first and foremost consideration. So with wax, I know some of you guys have already started to work with wax, and we did talk about some of that in prior weeks in the wax room, but I wanted to go through everything that we have available for you guys to use and just discuss a couple of things. It shouldn't last too long, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Safety. Safety glasses have to be worn when you're working with hot wax. If you're just working with cold wax and working with tools like this, you know, and making, you know, modifications or whatever cold, it's okay if you don't wear safety glasses. It's a good idea, I think, just in general in the sculpture studios to put them on, leave them on, and not worry, you know, not have to think about it. But if you're not doing anything that requires, you know, pouring hot wax or using some of the hot tools, you don't have to wear safety glasses. I would still recommend it, but it's not a requirement. The minute you start pouring hot wax or using the tools that produce heat and flame, you have to have them on, okay? So that's a requirement. The other thing is attire. Do not wear nice clothes when you're working with wax. If you have a shirt on that you care about, take it off. Have an apron or a smock or maybe your wax shirt. Years ago I had a button up on and I was doing some wax work, and I had my safety glasses on, but I didn't think about it, and some wax splashed onto my shirt. Instantly it became a wax shirt, right? I mean, it's not something that, I don't know, have you guys ever had wax on your clothing? It's not something that, you can search online for remedies for getting it off, but there's not really one out there that I've found is worth a darn. So just know that if you're working with hot wax and it gets on you, it's most likely going to stay there forever. Don't dress in super nice clothes or have something to block that. So that's really the only safety things that I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. The other is more common sense. If you're using something hot and it's plugged in, or you're using a flame, be mindful of that. You guys have started to use some of those things. You don't really want to wear gloves for this process, but if you did want to have a pair of your work gloves that were like dedicated wax gloves, you could do that. That would protect you from the heat in that case. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about at first, the basics, is the wax that we're using. It's a casting wax, so it's a slightly harder wax than maybe what you're used to if you've ever dealt with wax. And in this environment, regardless of the temperature outside, it's kind of a hard, cold material. So just putting your body heat to the wax will soften it and allow it to move a little bit more than it does when it's just in its cold state. When it's like this, you've got the ability to move it slightly, but not much before all of a sudden it breaks. And just by adding a little bit of heat to it, it will soften it and allow you to manipulate it. The other thing that we talk about when it comes to wax, because when you pull your first wax, it's kind of exciting, but then from there, you're thinking, okay, what the heck am I going to do with this thing? How am I going to join this with something else? Joining wax to wax, if you've ever manipulated clay, it's similar in some ways, in that in clay we talk a lot about scoring and slipping. You guys know this. And it's really about moisture content. It's trying to match the moisture content at the point of connection the best that you can. If you've got a piece of clay that's slightly dried out and a piece of brand new clay that's super moist, scoring and slipping the dried out piece and making sure the moisture content matches. With wax, it's similar, but it's not about moisture, it's about heat. So if you had let's say I just pulled this out of the mold and it was still warm, and then I had something that was cold and I wanted to attach the two, I've got to find a way to increase the heat at the point of connection where it's going to go into the piece. Does that make sense? So trying to match the heat or the temperature at the point of connection is the consideration. And you can do that a number of different ways. So we've got heat gun, we've got soldering irons that have been demoted to wax, we've got this hot knife, we've got flame, and the flame is nice because you can heat up a variety of different things that then in effect become, you know, a hot working tool. So there's a lot of ways to gain that heat, but by simply holding something for a while, it becomes a lot more malleable. It may not have enough heat depending on how hot the object is that you're going to join, but just simply keeping it in your hand for a couple of minutes makes it a lot more, I mean, now it's like a pretty hard piece of clay, but so much softer than it was just a minute ago, right? How long was I talking? Maybe 2 minutes-ish? So just holding it with your body heat is gonna soften it and make it this piece of raw material that I can add to what I'm doing. And depending on how thick something is, this is a hollow cast, it's probably 1/16 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit more. If I just sit here, you know, maybe I'm watching a show on my phone or something and just put some heat to it, it's gonna bring it closer to where it was maybe when you first cast it. So you can add just body heat to it and do it a lot more kind of gradually than any one of these tools, because as you can imagine, these tools are gonna put heat pretty quickly and pretty focused, right? So it has its place where this is more ambient, slow heat, and it takes a little bit more patience, but it's really the first way to think about adding heat to your wax. Yeah. I know some of this might seem real basic, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with doing that. So just to point out some of the tools that we have available for you guys that aren't heat related. We do have, you know, tools that are designed for wax working and have been purchased as such and live in the wax working drawers in there. They, you know, different, you know, kind of spreading tools, carving tools, you know, scratching tools. But we also have these very, you know, high-tech tools that have been just given to us, and we have more of these, more spoons, more forks, more knives in another drawer in there, and so we can use those. The one thing I want to say about the tools though, and I think I mentioned it in plaster, is don't grab another tool from somewhere else that's not a wax working tool and bring it into the wax room. Why not? Anybody want to take a guess?
Will become a wax working tool.
Yeah, because then it becomes a wax tool, and it will never not be a wax tool. It's, you know, once it enters that room, that's it. That's its life. It's become a wax tool. This was not a wax tool. Not that long ago, somebody was like, I need a pair of pliers. Didn't see this pair maybe, grabbed it, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's our second pair of wax working pliers in there. I know I can burn this off and bring it back, you know, but it's nice to have tools in there that people want. But please don't go into the tool room and grab a brand new, you know, or even a used pair of anything and bring it into the wax room. If you need something that you cannot find, let me know. I will find something to bring in there. Because like I said, once it enters the plaster room or wax room, it lives there. That said, like I said, some of the tools have been demoted to the wax and plaster room. So if you need something specific, just look around, make sure that it's not already in there before asking me. You know, some things have been donated over the years. I don't know where half of this stuff came from. Heat has been applied, you know. The wax is still on there to a certain extent. Even the box knife, you know, this is now the wax working box knife. In addition to spoons and forks and the nice wax working tools, we also have woodworking tools that were originally designed for clay but are now wax working. Wooden tools, little dental picks and things. We have some of these in plaster, and these little tiny loops. You know, thinking general to specific. These are great for adding texture to wax, whether it's hot or cold. But don't start with this tool. You know, thinking more, you know, broad strokes and changes, and then going back and adding detail with some of the smaller things. Again, like any other concentration, we talked about general to specific. Okay. So yeah, these are some of the tools we have. Cleaning up is going to be a big thing too for you guys. I know some people have started with wax, but after today, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of people moving in and out of that room. So please try your best to keep it clean. I know that cold wax on the table becomes harder to clean up. Same thing with these trays. Just do your best to scrape it off. You don't have to get the heat involved at the end of the semester. We'll have somebody in the wax room cleaning things up. Like I told you guys, I think a few weeks ago, we have a couple tools for doing the wax out of the can. So we do this over the wax pot, take the flame to it, and just melt all the wax off of it. So, if you're interested in that, we can, I can help you guys, but you don't have to do that. But scraping things off the trays, scraping wax off the tables, trying your best, the wax pot in there, I think I talked about the wax on the controls, trying your best not to drip over the controls. If it does, trying to clean it off while it's warm. And if not, go back with some of these tools and scrape off as much as you can. Just being mindful of the fact that lots of people are going to be in there working, and it's cumulative. So do your best to help out with that. This stuff, all the tools live in drawers. So if you walk into the wax room, that first set of drawers, the top drawer is going to be this cold working, small utensil type stuff. The second drawer is going to have all the heat producing tools. You guys know where the torches are and the fuel sources, but just so you guys know, the flammables cabinet in there have a couple of torches and bottles of propane, because we don't need MAP gas specifically for wax working. So if you don't want to pull from there, you can just grab a propane cylinder and screw a torch on there. All right, let's see, a couple other things. I would highly recommend, and I think I already mentioned it, casting your objects hollow. If you have an idea where you need a solid version of what you're doing, maybe you're thinking about some sort of tower object and you want the bottom to be heavier, to control it being tippy, or you're thinking about some cantilevered object and you need something heavier on the bottom, okay? But for the most part, I would highly recommend trying to cast yours hollow. It's going to be easier to work with. It's going to be a less metal that you have to deal with and pay for and all that. And in the cooling process, when we actually pour the metal, it works better for the cooling process. You can pass this around. You can see what a solid object versus a hollow object feels like. And some objects it may not be possible to pour a hollow version, like Ion's tooth. It's just going to be a solid tooth, and that's totally fine. Just the size of it, right? Whereas somebody else's object might be like a gray area where if you forget about it, you're like, crap, now it's a solid object. It's not a big deal, but try your best to think about these as hollow works. That said, when it comes to casting in metal, let's try to have the wall thickness anywhere on your object not be less than 1/4 of an inch. So if you have a cast that's super thin, like this one, I would say, like I said, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. It's not super thick anywhere. The metal wants to flow better in just a slightly thicker wall thickness. We can cast thinner, but it's just easier to cast it just a little bit thicker. So right around the 1/4 inch threshold, I think would be a good wall thickness. You can go a little bit thicker than that, but try not to go too much thinner than that if you can help it. All right, so some of the tools that you'll most likely be using to attach your objects together are going to be heat-producing tools. So for example, if I've got something like this, and I just, press it in here, and its temperature right now, it's the same temperature. It's not cold per se, but it's certainly not warm, right? It's like room temperature wax. So if I just use my hands the way that
I would if I was attaching some, clay objects together. If you guys have any experience with clay, I know some people have more than others, but if I did this connection in clay, what's going to happen when I go to just like pull these apart? They're going to pop apart. And why is that?
Smooth and smooth.
Because I haven't really intermingled the material, right? I haven't really got it to really become one homogeneous material at that point of connection. And with wax, really the best way to do it is with heat. And then, but unlike clay, in some instances or in some cases, once you connect it, you really want to leave it alone and let it really cool back down to room temperature before you go to move it. So for example, if I add heat here and really mash and mix the material really well together, I'm going to want to leave it alone. And I mentioned that fridge over there. I'm going to try to get it hooked up. You can flash cool it. You can bring it outside. On a cool morning like today, it's going to cool it down faster if you're looking to move a little bit quicker. And then adding material as well. So around the point of connection, I'll do it hot in a minute, but adding a little bit of extra material. If you're thinking about welding, it's similar to welding. You guys have all now MIG welded. That filler rod that comes out, it's adding metal as you're welding. You're not just melting the two metals together, you're adding more metal. So similarly, I'm gonna melt these two wax pieces together, but then I'm gonna add a little bit at that point of connection, so it's a stronger joint. Really the worst thing that can happen is when we're all ready to move into ceramic shell process of coating these waxes, is for things to break apart in the middle of that process. So as much time and energy and intention you can put into the connections to make sure these things don't break apart is going to be really important. Okay, all right. So like I said, a couple of different tools. Has everybody used a heat gun before? Anybody not used a heat gun? Okay, so quite a few people. I know it sounds funny, but I have to say it every time I use it. This is not a hair dryer. Again, I know a bunch of people laugh at that. I'm serious, this is not a hair dryer. Do not use it as such. I know it kind of looks like one, and it produces heat, right, and air, hot air, but it's way hotter than a hair dryer, and it can burn you if you're not careful. It can singe your hair, it could catch things on fire. So just be mindful of that. This one, obviously is the wax working heat gun. We have another one in the tool room that's not used for wax. Please don't grab it. This one lives in the tool room. And this one's really nice because it has a stand, so you can turn it on and work with something above it. In this case, wax is going to drip down into the heat gun, so I wouldn't recommend that type of working necessarily, but it does have that capacity to be able to do it. It's got a low setting and a high setting, and again, I know you guys have used heat guns before, but you can kind of do this number to find out about how far out, right? I'm like a foot out from this, a little bit more, and it's becoming too difficult to have my bare hand in front of. So it's got a bunch of heat, and likewise, it's going to very quickly heat your wax up. You can kind of see it going from matte finish to glossy pretty quickly. So I can add heat, but what do you think is happening to the heat and the wax at this point? Where is the heat exactly? It is just surface, exactly. So what happens here is, if I go to start to put something together, I haven't really heated up the interior of this. If I went to heat this guy here with the heat gun, because of its wall thickness, it's going to heat thoroughly a lot faster than something that's thicker. So this isn't the most efficient way to get something to have that heat content for connection, but it does soften the texture. If you've got a texture that's rough and you just want to give it a slicker surface, just by adding a little bit of heat, it allows that top surface to melt and create a much slicker surface. So this has its place definitely as a tool, but it may not be the best way to add that ambient, thorough heat. Everybody, yep, okay. Keep in mind now that this area right here is super hot. This entire thing you can grab, but don't don't grab that. These tools, when you're done using them, you'll most likely be in the wax room. I brought it out here, you know, because it's easier to do the demo out here, but you'll most likely be in the wax room. It's okay to leave tools out when they're hot. It's just more of a, like an understood, I've left it out because it's hot, but if you're around long enough for it to cool, wrap it back up, put it in the drawer. And if you come in and somebody's left something out and it's cold, please be respectful of the studio and just take the time, wrap it up, put it up for the next person, and they'll do the same for you. Questions so far? Okay. Hot knife. Anybody used a hot knife before? Okay, some people yes, some people no. This is a great tool. It's not super expensive. I bought it at Harbor Freight. It could be used to cut foam. We use it for wax. And I just got actually a foam cutter that doesn't produce heat. So if you're interested in cutting foam, don't use this. We have a better way of doing it. But this works really well for just making cuts. You can also use this as a tool to manipulate your wax if you want to, but what I've found is that it's just really good for just making cuts. If you had a slab of wax that you wanted to, you know, cut a piece off of, once it heats up, it will just cut through the wax. Got it on 5, which is the hottest. It's not quite like watching water boil, but pretty close. We live in such a instant gratification society.
This is pretty thrilling.
What?
So this is pretty thrilling.
Thrilling?
Thrilling, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I have adrenaline pumping right
It's
now.
kind of, there's a certain satisfaction to it, you know? Okay, maybe I'm weird, I don't know. But, so if you were interested in, so actually a side note on safety is we have a vent system in here. This is producing a lot of fumes. I would recommend adding the the ventilation for this. Not right now because you guys won't be able to hear me very well. This will be the most amount of fumes I'm going to produce in this demo, hopefully. But if you're in here working or in there working, we do have the vent system available for you guys. So just to point it out, it's that light switch as you enter the room on your left. It's got an orange label. It says main room ventilation, and then these snorkels throughout the room can be pulled down. You want to make sure that they're on, and it'll help to evacuate the fumes. If you're in the wax room, there's a switch on the wall that just turns on the hood and just takes the fumes away. All right. So hot knife, like I said, it's usually used for just cutting things. If you have, you know, a pour spout that you want to remove pretty quickly, this is a good way of doing it because it heats up really quickly. It's flat, and you don't have to deal with flame, and then you can use the flat surface to continue to alter the surface of your wax. Wax, the minute it is hot, it turns into a liquid, and gravity takes it down. So if you have your piece like this and you're working on it like this, what's going to happen? It's going to drip down onto the piece, which isn't a terrible thing if you like that texture, but then eventually it's going to drip onto your fingers. And 180-degree hot wax on your fingers is maybe something you've dealt with before, but it doesn't feel very good. So use gravity to your advantage. Another hot tool. So over here for that. You guys can help me remember to, I'm going to put it on the floor. Help me remember to pick it back up in a minute. Any questions so far? So I'm kind of trying to move general to specific as we were talking about. Another tool that gets brought into the wax room and never leaves for its life are soldering irons. I bought a few wood burners and soldering irons to just have in wax, but inevitably somebody brings in a soldering iron and then it just becomes a wax working tool. These are great because in addition to producing heat, you also have kind of the dexterity and the finite, detail working of a point. So in this case, what I would probably do with this, where we talked about the surface heat that the heat gun was able to produce, this is going to give you the ability to kind of get in and get the inside of where you want to connect hot, right? As well as the outside. So thinking about these two things coming together, I'm going to not only heat up the surface, the shell area, but I'm going to basically add heat to that area and this area here. I feel like I'm doing surgery or something. Not that I've ever done surgery. It's funny the things we say, the metaphors. I feel like I'm doing such and such. Never done that before, but I've seen it on TV, so it's good enough, right? So now, pretty quickly, I want to mash these two together, right? And you, some of y'all saw what just happened is the warm wax just spread out of the way. So now I can take this and add it back, and it's not so hot that I'm burning my thumb, but it allows me, rather than using this little bit and rolling little coils, it allows me to have that extra bulk at the point of connection. And then what I'll probably do is go back and make sure that where it is, it has the same heat, the same temperature. Now I don't want to press it because that's going to not feel very good. I'll just wait. I'm going to allow that to cool because what I really want to do is turn it over, right? But right now, because that area that I just added a bunch of heat to is super soft and would just come apart, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to allow that to cool. I'm going to do something else, and then I'm going to come back to this, flip it over, and do the exact same thing. And then I'm going to feel pretty good about that connection, but I'm still not going to move it until it's really cool. Maybe I take the whole tray, put it in the fridge. Maybe I take the whole tray, bring it outside to help it cool down faster. But fight the urge to move these things. You do a little bit, and then you have something else to do. Maybe it's not even wax. Maybe you work on your metal project, or work on your final project, which I'm going to introduce next week. But have something else to do. Maybe you're working on some other class. I don't really care, but give this enough time to really cool and connect. Okay. Any questions so far? We're good? Yeah. Some of these tools may not work. If you plug a soldering iron in and after a few minutes it's not hot and it doesn't do what this one just did, don't put it back in the drawer. Please, just literally put it in the trash. I don't want tools that don't work in there, and let me know. Say, hey, there's actually only 1 or 2 working soldering irons in the wax room. Can we get some more? Let me know, I'll bring them in. These things, unfortunately, don't last too long. They don't even last too long in the actual soldering process. They don't make these things like they used to. But then adding, this crazy wax and it getting down into the innards of these machines, they have a pretty short life. So if something's not working after a couple minutes, literally just chuck it. But before you do, some of these may have a loose connection and it may be able to be fixed. Like this one, for example, if that screw wasn't tightened down real good, this thing does have the ability to get hot, and maybe this is getting hot, but this isn't. That is easily fixed. So before you do that, let me know. But for this one, for example, it's kind of all one unit. I actually don't know how to deal with that one. But if it's not getting hot, you're welcome to let me know. If you don't want to just throw it away, let me know. But otherwise separate it from the the other soldering iron, so I at least know I need to work on it. The last thing I want to show you guys is the flame, and I know that's not specific, it's more of a general tool, but I know you guys are probably going to use it at some point, and at this point you have used flame in your brazing quite a bit, so you have a good experience with it. Remember, these things are top heavy, so try not to be working on it and then just bump it over, and all of a sudden you've got an open flame that's hitting something. But all the safety considerations are here for this. You can definitely do it like this. I wouldn't suggest getting your hand that close. This is going to produce the same effect as the heat gun, but just a lot faster, right? So you're going to be able to very quickly add surface heat to something and get it to melt. If that's the effect you want, great. But it's such an aggressive amount of heat on something. I doubt anybody's going to want to use the flame for that purpose, but just be mindful of where your hands are, where the heat is, where the wax is going to drip. Have at least a tray, if not a piece of wax paper or parchment paper underneath what you're working on, but it will create a different look if that's what you want. But more often than not, what I'm pretty sure folks are going to want to use the flame for is heating up the tools either that are purchased specifically for wax working, or the makeshift tools. As long as they're metal, you can heat them up with a flame. And so, depending on what tool you have, will dictate what it's able to do once it's hot. This is a spoonish type tool, and I'm able to scrape, soften, cut. I can do a lot of things with this tool when it's hot that I can't do as easily when it's cold. And likewise, if you want to use a finer tool for finer work, this is probably the best one. Depending on who used it last, it's going to have probably residual wax on it. There are certain considerations when working in a communal studio. This is one of them. Just being mindful of that type of thing. If you've got the time and want to clean these off more than scraping them off, you could heat them up. Do a light kind of flick, get the wax off of them, let them cool, put them back in the tray. That's why we have an aluminum tray. Not that this is the worst thing ever if it's got residual wax on it, but it just makes it easier for somebody to work with when they come to it if it's not covered in wax. So yeah, this is going to produce a lot finer kind of detail. I can scrape, I can mix together. I can do I can cut, I can add texture. There's so many different things you can do with these tools that just goes a little bit faster when they're hot. Don't heat these up. It's such a small little element here. It's going to do that. That might happen anyway, where it breaks, but most likely somebody heated it up and it doesn't have the bulk to be able to handle the heat. So don't heat those up. It's okay to heat up the spoons and whatnot, and I would hope you guys aren't gonna. Maybe that's just yes. Yeah. So now I'm gonna do it for the demo. I probably would have left it for a little bit longer, but I'm gonna flip it over and do the same thing here. Instead of heating back up the soldering iron, I can use this tool to do the same thing. So let's say you're in there and There's 2 working soldering irons, and they're both being used. You can create the same effect. A minute ago, I did it here, and you saw that piece kind of fly off of it because of the force of the flame, but this is going to produce the same effect. Not quite as clean as the soldering iron, but still. Any question? All right. I mean, it's all, you know, common sense. You guys are going to get better at working with wax as you work with it. And next week and the following week, we'll talk about gating and venting these things. It's a whole separate demo, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the tools we had and the different considerations for using them. Yeah? No questions?
What temperature does it liquefy?
That's a good question. It's around 150-ish, but then we have the wax pot set at about 175, 180. If you go hotter than that, it starts to want to boil, and any lower than that, it starts to create like a film on the surface of the wax. So like 170 to 180 is like the perfect temperature for liquid wax, I guess, or for this wax at least. Yeah.
Do we have a wax oven?
We don't have a wax
Like
oven.
if we wanted to heat the whole thing and make it a little more valuable?
We don't have that yet. I'll look into that. I think we're good.